Podsters, what we're going to talk about today, it's a biggie. So this is going to help you with your career. It's going to help you in your personal life. It's going to help you with your business. What we are going to talk about is how to own any room, or more specifically, how to be an effective speaker. Some of this is in the book when I talk about how to speak up and how to stand out. More of it is not in the book, and it's a culmination of a bunch of stuff that I've learned over the years, both by watching other speakers and by seeing what resonates when I speak. And the reason why I want to talk about this, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, we here at Unmute Yourself, the podcast, have so I used to do a lot about, or I used to talk a lot about very tactical, here's how to speak up, here's how to stand out. Depending on what's going on in my life, that might change. And I might talk about how to thrive or boundaries or how to manage your time or whatever the case may be. And I want to make sure that for those of you who have been here for a long time and for those of you who are newer here, that we are sticking true to the OG. Here's how to speak up. Here is how to stand out, and here's how to step up. So today we're going to talk about how to be an effective speaker and how to own the room. And when I say own the room, I mean that how to command attention in the room and how to make sure that your message is resonating. The reason why this is so important to me at this particular moment is because I attended a conference last week. And for 25 years, I was in the meetings industry. I planned meetings, I booked meetings, I attended meetings. I now speak at meetings. So meetings are not new to me. And effective meetings also aren't new to me. And I was so excited for this conference. First of all, I really was interested in almost all of the topics. It was my first time attending this conference. It's an annual conference. It was my first time in a new role with a different perspective. And I was just super pumped to go to this conference. And when I left, I said to myself, well, this is 7 hours of my life that I will never get back. And what a disappointment. And it was a disappointment because it was a massive, massive missed opportunity. There was probably over, I would say 400 people at this conference, probably about 400 people. And the way it was set up, the speakers, the formats, just missed opportunity. For 7 hours, the speakers spoke at us. There were in the keynote session, there were probably, let's say, 5 speakers. They each, let's say, spoke for 20 or 25 minutes each. And it was speaking at us. And people are engaged for about 20 minutes. People attending a meeting are engaged for about 20 minutes. Then they kind of come in and out in terms of their brain and their function and their active participation in the meeting. So imagine sitting there for 5 hours and just having people speak and come up to the microphone and speak and come up to the microphone and speak. And I was just blown away. So then we were heading into breakout sessions. I'm like, great, we're going to go to the breakouts. This is where it's going to be interactive. This is where I'm going to be able to hear from other people, share ideas, brainstorm, have some takeaways, all the things. And the breakout sessions were exactly the same thing. People speaking at us. So this got me thinking, and this got me to write my weekly newsletter that I write to my community. It's going to go out today, and it's going to talk about how to be an effective speaker. And I'm still so passionate about it that I want to talk about it today. So we are going to talk about how to know the room, how to connect with the room, and how to engage the room, because there's nothing more important than making sure that your speech is, or your presentation is, engaging. So you can use this if you're an introvert, if you're an extrovert, if you are speaking to a large group, if you're speaking to a small group, if you are with a client meeting, if it's a potential new client meeting, whatever the case may be. Here are the 3 hard and fast rules. I'm going to call them rules for how to own the room. Okay. The first is to know the room. And that might sound pretty basic. When I say know the room, I mean the physical room, the physical environment. There's a few ways you can do that. So anytime I'm about to give a speech, I'll say, what room are we going to be in? And I'll go online and I'll look at that meeting room. So for example, I spoke a couple of years ago in Chicago. It was a beautiful meeting room, stunning, all windows, which is fantastic. At the same time, I needed to know where the screen was going to be, because if the sun was shining, it was going to be shining on the screen. I knew that I had to have darker slides, and I couldn't have white text on these slides because the sun would bleach it out. It's important to know the setup of the room. So, and this is day of. So, off the other thing I'll do, I will go to a conference to speak. I will go down to the meeting room either the night before or the morning of, and this is in my contract. We'll walk through the room. It's very common. A lot of people do this. Most people do this. I will walk through, I will check the AV, I will check the microphone. Do I have a wireless mic? Is it a handheld mic? What does the stage look like? How many risers are there? Am I going to be walking up 3 or 4 risers? Is there a stage? Is there not a stage? What does the screen look like? Is there a teleprompter? What's the room setup going to be? And here's why this is important. Every one of my keynotes has an interactive exercise. And if we agreed that it was going to be tables and chairs, and I get in the room and it's only chairs, which happens often, many times, for whatever reasons, the event planners need to change the setup of the room. That's fine. I need to know that ahead of time so that I can tweak the interactive exercise and so that I'm not surprised. I will walk around and I'll go to the back of the room and I'll do a sound check. Can the person in the back hear me? I will look at the location of the room. So if the room is around the corner, if you have to walk a mile to get to the room, at the reception the night before, when I talk to people, I'll say, hey, I'm looking forward to you coming to the conference. Just so you know, it's a bit of a walk. So you might want to wear comfortable shoes, or I'll get the word out that I'm excited to see everybody. Here's where the meeting room is. Anything I can do to make it easier for people to attend, have more people attend, and have them enjoy the experience. That is what I want to try to do. So at this particular conference, here's why this was relevant. First of all, the room setup wasn't great. It was good. I mean, it was tables and chairs, which is great, but some of the tables you couldn't really see the speaker. There was one podium and the speakers stood at that podium. That's the other thing, Podsters. If you don't have slides or some kind of a visual aid, that's okay. I mean, I recommend you use them whenever you can, if it supports your message and if it supports the environment. If you don't have that, walk around the stage. You break it up when you do that. Walk around the stage if you're comfortable doing that. So at this session, everybody stood in front of the podium. It was horrible. This was like what not to do. Everybody just stood at the podium. Here we are today. We're talking about that. It was awful. So anyway, there was also sunlight coming in through the windows, so you couldn't see the slides when they did have slides. And I'll talk about slides when we talk about how to engage the room. The meeting room was freezing. So temperature, oftentimes meeting rooms are very cold. I understand why that needs to happen. If there's going to be 400, 500, 700 people in the room, if there's going to be 3,000 people in the room, they need to keep it cool. You need to make sure that you're prepared for that and that you're not freezing. And also, if you're going to talk to people the night before, remind them to bring something, warm. Particularly women oftentimes will wear, a sleeveless sheath dress, and then we'll be freezing and we're not paying attention to the conference. So know the room, know the setup. That's number one. Next is connect with your room. And by connect with the room, I mean connect with the people attending, the people in the room. Oftentimes, or every time, I send out a questionnaire ahead of time when I'm speaking, and I send it to the planners, and I say, okay, tell me a little bit about the people attending. What's important to them? What are their pain points? Tell me a little bit about the demographic. Is it going to be mostly women? Is it going to be women and men? What's top of mind for your industry right now? What's some jargon? If I can work some jargon in there, I can connect with them. What should I avoid talking about? Because oftentimes there are subjects that are taboo. We don't want to talk about this. It's a sore spot for many of the attendees. And the number one, so that's ahead of time. I will ask the planners what's resonated in the past. Who is your best speaker and what made them your best speaker? So all of these different things. I have the luxury of being able to do that. Sometimes you don't have a system in place. If you're being invited to speak for 10 or 15 minutes, it might be you're not a professional speaker. Okay. So here's how to connect with the room instantly, and this will work every time. Always open with a story. People remember stories. People connect with stories. A story will resonate with people, and a story breaks the ice. And you don't need to make it you know, you don't need to rack your brain for a story. Oftentimes, if I'm traveling for an event, I'll tell a travel story. I can talk about TSA, or I can talk about the hotel, or I can talk about, let's say I'm going to Portland, Oregon. I can say something like, boy, you know, how many of you are from Portland? And I will ask the question, how many of you are from here? Boy, do I love flying into Portland. There is nothing better than when I look out that window of that airplane and all I see is green. All I see is trees. You all have a pretty special place here. Am I right? That's one quick little story to resonate. Another thing I'll do is I'll tie it into something that's happening in the world, or we're coming up in October. I might say, you know, how many of you have kids you're going to take them trick or treating? And the audience will raise their hands, and I'll say, well, how many of you go through your kids' candy? And I'll put the little air quotes. You go through your kids' candy to make sure it's safe. And I'll tell the story of how when I was a kid, my dad used to go through my candy and make sure it was safe. And it was remarkable that it was always the Charleston chews. There was something wrong with the Charleston chews. And I would come to him with a big pile of candy that it had taken me hours to trick or treat for. And like a third of it would end up not making the cut. And that'll get a little laugh. We all know it was always the Charleston chews. He wanted the Charleston chews. It's a cute story. And you know, you can resonate or you can connect with people that way. So it could be something timely. It could be something about your travel there. Could be something about the meeting room. Could be something about the weather. Could be something about the organization. Just some little story. And maybe it's a story of, you know, before I start, I want to talk to you about what brings me here to you today and why I'm here today. And you share a story from your past as to why you wanted to be there today. Okay. So that's another way to connect. Because again, people remember, they might not remember everything you said, but they will remember how they felt. And Maya Angelou is famous for this quote: people won't remember what you said, they'll remember how you made them feel. So I would adapt that quote in this circumstance to say they'll remember that you connected, but they'll remember that story. Anyway, one of the other benefits of knowing your audience ahead of time, if you can, or even talking to them before the meeting, you know, I'll always stand outside and talk to people and why are you here and what are you most looking forward to with the conference and all that, is then you can customize your points. So it doesn't matter what is in your presentation, you can customize it for them. And, you know, hey, I was talking to someone out in the hallway and they said this, or I was talking to so and so and she said that this is important to her. So here's why I'm going to talk about this today. And you can bring the point back to them, which is incredibly powerful. And if you remember from the book, one of the 3 persuasion principles is to start with them. So the more you understand about your audience, the more you can connect the points back to them and they will remember. Okay. The last is what I found was particularly conspicuously absent from this conference that I attended. And there was one breakout that was really interesting. So I was engaged because I was interested. And again, and this is no disrespect to the speakers. This is the format they were given. They could have engaged more and they could have engaged the conversation more. So hands down, the most important thing you can do is engage with your audience. And this is incredibly simple. You can change your speech at any time. You can blow the whole thing up in the middle of the presentation if you see that people aren't engaged. I was in the back of the room and I saw 2/3 of the room during the keynote session with their heads down. What do you think they were doing, Podsters? We know what they were doing. They were on their phones. And if I were in the front of the room and that was happening to me, here's what I might do. I might say, there's a few things that I could do. One, I might say, I know a lot of this, or I feel like some of this content might be a little dry. I'm about to make a point that's really important. So I'm going to ask for you to hang on to bear with me and really pay attention for what I'm about to say. Because Podsters, my goal is to get them to have 2 or 3 actionable takeaways from every speech. And if I'm not connecting with them for some reason, I'm losing them and I need to bring them back to me. By the way, this doesn't happen that often. And I'm not saying that to sound arrogant. It's because I do my homework ahead of time and I know who's in the audience and I will customize it. If people aren't paying attention, I might say something like, I know we all have a lot going on. What I'm about to say is really important. So I'm going to ask you to bring it back to me for just a second. Blah, 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 blah. I might say something like, and if you take one thing away from this conference, one thing away from this speech, Here's what it is. And that way I get them to come back. One of the ways to make sure that you don't lose them in the first place is to simply engage, ask questions. What was disappointing to me in this conference was nobody asked questions. They didn't say, "How many of you are familiar with this concept?" All they had to do was say that. People will raise their hand or not raise their hand. Then you know the level of details that you need to get into. If you say, "How many of you are familiar with this concept?" and everybody raises their hand, you know that you don't need to cover the basics. And you can say, "Great, I'm going to skip over the basics, or I'm going to go through these really quickly, and we're going to get right to the meat of the presentation." If you say, "How many of you are familiar with this concept?" and no one raises their hand, you can say, "Awesome. I'm going to start out with a basic understanding of what we're talking about today, and then we're going to build on that." All you need to do is ask, and they will tell you. If you see if you if they're not engaged, one of the things you can do is say, you can throw out a question and you can say, "You know what? I'm going to throw out this question and I'm going to ask you to split into your groups, at your table groups, and talk about this question on your own. I want you guys to talk about it, and then let's talk about what you heard." That's another way to get people engaged and involved and having a conversation. It gets them engaged in the conversation. If it's a very dry topic, one of the topics that was being spoken about at this conference was energy. And I don't mean like human energy. I mean energy like atoms and hydrogen particles, physical energy and or scientific energy. And that's pretty dry to me. It's probably not to a room full of physicists. To me, it's a little dry. I might have said, "All right, everybody pull out a piece of paper. I want you to draw for me what you think hydrogen looks like." Whatever. And then people could have held it up. There would have been a wide range of people because this was not a room full of physicists. People could have had ridiculous looking drawings and we all kind of chuckle and laugh and say, "Okay, I'm going to take you through what this looks like." So that you are making them a part of the discussion. There is nothing worse than speaking at someone for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 45 minutes. And the same goes for if you're reading from your slides. So there was a book a long time ago on PowerPoint, and it was called, now I can't remember. Of course, I can't remember now. I can't remember the name of it. Resonate was the name of the book. And I bought it. And this was a long time ago. I think it was called Resonate. What this book says, and I agree with it, is rather than putting a bunch of words on the slide, try to demonstrate as much as you can with images. And I really took that to heart. So one of the things I'll do, let's say I'm talking about self-care and how to thrive. And one of the things I do when I need to thrive is I'll make sure that I'm drinking green juice or that I'm drinking healthy. So instead of saying on a slide, "Make sure you drink green juice," I will put a photo of a green juice on the slide. I will make it the size of the slide. So what they're looking at is a green juice. And then I may or may not add text to it. If I add text to it, I add text as the overlay. And never more than 3 bullets. Never more than 3 bullets to a slide, ever, ever, ever. So at this conference, I knew what they did. They took the annual report and they took the PDF from the annual report and put it on the slide. First of all, you couldn't read it because the font was so small. Second of all, that was a massive missed opportunity. They could have talked about what was in the annual report. And they didn't. They put it up on the screen and everyone was like, "What?" And they were like, "Here's the annual report." And it was a missed opportunity. How many times am I going to say missed opportunity? Probably about 5 more. So try to do as much as you can with your visual aids, with pictures, photos, images. If you want to, one of my favorites was if I talk about the ripple effect. I talk about the ripple effect of the gender wage gap or the gender pay gap and the ripple effect it has over for women over 40 years. So what I used to do is I would just take a photo of a ripple of a ripple of water in the ocean. This happened to be in a glass. And I would just call it the ripple effect. So will people remember the actual data of, well, here's the exact ripple effect? No. What they will remember is there's a ripple effect with the gender wage gap. And that's what I want them to remember. I don't need them to remember all the facts. Of course, I want them to remember some of them. I want them to remember my point. And my point is not facts. My point is interpreting those facts and the message from those facts. And If you're if you're trying to engage the room and you're simply not connecting, first of all, that's not a great feeling. And the first thing I would say is try not to freak out. Just try not to let it really, really throw you off your game. Because if you're not engaging and then you're off your game even more, it's gonna snowball. And I'd love to tell you what I would do if no one in the room was engaged, but honestly, I don't think I really just don't think it's ever happened to me. Oh, yeah, actually, it does. Actually, it does sometimes. So if the audience isn't engaging, there could be any number of reasons. By the way, it could be the culture of that company. I remember I did a virtual program a few years ago, and I really enjoyed speaking with the planner. And I got on the Zoom, and there was very, very little feedback. And I came to find out later that they were all afraid to speak up because the CEO was on the phone. And I will ask, are there going to be executive level people in the room, on the line, blah, blah, blah. Does your team feel comfortable speaking in front of them? And I'll do all that. Anyway, so if you find they're not engaging, I would ask somebody specific in the audience. So let's say I'm talking about personal board of directors. I might say, if this is live, I might say, how many of you have personal board of directors? And if nobody really does anything in the front row, I'll say, okay, you in the white shirt, have you heard of personal board of directors? And I'll ask them the questions. And I find that when you ask people questions, they will respond and they will answer. And you just kind of keep it going that way. And if you feel like you're losing them and you want to change it up, change it up. Change it up. It's your presentation. So, Podsters, we talked about knowing the environment or knowing the room, connecting with the room, and engaging the room. If you remember those three things the next time you have to give a presentation or the next time you get to give a presentation, these are the three things that have served me well for my entire career. So this is it. This is really it. If you want to take this to a different level, as you know, I'm still offering speaker school. I think I'm going to close that out relatively soon, probably at the end of this month. So if you haven't signed up yet, it's 3 sessions. It's one-on-one coaching with me to build, develop, present your keynote. We get your speaker sheet together. We do some marketing and talk about the best marketing. It's like speaker in a box. There's a link to that in the show notes. The other thing I want to mention is doors are closing soon for my Do the Thing retreat in Naples, Florida. This is 2 days of group masterminding, one-on-one coaching, that thing that you've been wanting to do. Maybe it's writing the book, maybe it's launching the podcast, maybe it's starting chapter 2 of your career, maybe it's retiring, maybe it's, I don't know what it is, but we all have this thing. And this is 2.5 days for you to get out of your day to day and meet with the experts, brainstorm with other women, really enjoy the energy and the environment of the warm weather and other like-minded people, and bang it out. You will leave with your plan. If it's not completed, you will leave with your actual specific action plan with a timeline. So, Podsters, that's it for today. You might have noticed that we dropped the podcast on Wednesday. So we are now releasing the podcast on Wednesdays. That's the same day I release my emails. If you're not in the email community yet, there's a link to that in the show notes. I love you. Can't wait to see you next week. I have a really exciting topic next week. I am pretty sure we're going to talk about acting as if, and how acting as if brings you to that level that you want to get to. And this is going to be pretty powerful. I'm pretty excited about this one. So until then, Podsters, peace out. Keep the comments coming, and I will see you next week.